welcome to another installment of the Fragments Silicon Reviews. Yeah. Don't mind the audio. It's Petty is going through some things.
Don't think that's me this time.
Anyway, so 4 games up this week. The first of which is Dragonborne. Right. So where to start with this? This is a curiosity because, so if you remember last, I want to say either year or season, could have been 2 seasons ago. Point is, when we reviewed a game called Dogurai, and it aped the Game Boy aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So this game goes a step further and is an actual Game Boy game. Going back to Dogurai, that was not only something that really couldn't be done on a proper Game Boy, but its visuals were more enhanced for the Super Game Boy. This is like pure Game Boy, pure undistilled Game Boy. In that, this was an actual game released on the Game Boy this year. The developer produced it on, I hesitate to use the word reproduction cartridge, since this isn't a reproduction. But, I really don't know how that works with old systems and the present day. Like, if they have to get the licensing from like Nintendo or Sega or whomever when they're releasing, new games on old systems. But that's all beside the point.
I imagine there's a way to do it without any official stuff if you have to.
That's my imagining as well. And it's always like, this is even more of a curio than most retro games because, somebody's said to themselves, you know what retro project I want to do? A Game Boy game. A Game Boy RPG. Like, okay, there's no easy way for me to say this, and that is the Game Boy, the original Game Boy, was kind of trash. Kind of like, yes, it had amazing games and all that stuff, but the original Game Boy also had a terrible screen, which has only gotten worse as time went on.
Uh-huh.
Which I suspect is behind the rationale of making an RPG. Because you know what you don't really have to worry about in terms of an RPG? Ghosting. Like, if the image is ghost, who cares? It's not like it's going to affect your skill set much.
Also, if you suddenly have a hard time seeing the screen, it's generally slow enough that you can, reposition the unit without having to worry about falling in a pit or getting hit by an enemy in the middle of the time it takes you to find an angle where the screen is reflecting the right amount of light.
Right. Especially since this is a turn-based RPG. So you don't have to worry about getting hit by an enemy or, things like that in this game. That being said, even for a Game Boy RPG, this is on the simple side. Like, I have played a fair amount of Game Boy Color RPGs. I put the ones that this reminds me the most of, I might be the only one who's played these, is the Sword of Hope games. Really early Game Boy RPGs, first-person perspective, like single-player combat, and yeah, that's this game really. You are just one character who fights against one enemy. Now there are bosses and stuff, and for multi encounters, it's done gauntlet style. Like, you will fight one enemy after the other. So it's an interesting dichotomy of sorts. Also, weirdly enough, it's got some modern accoutrements to it that you wouldn't really expect for something that's aping the old school so much, but they are there. For example, you don't have levels in this game. And I will tell you right now, levels were one of the premier things that defined an RPG as an RPG versus an adventure game. Like, if we're going strictly old school, this would be more adventure game because you don't get experience points, you don't get levels, and yeah, that does get into the whole how much of a point there is to battles. Well, that's another modern accoutrement. There are no random battles here. You see the enemies on screen. Fighting them is optional sometimes. Sometimes not, but they will be on screen represented by a sprite, and they don't respawn. You beat an enemy once, they're gone. Like I said, this is all modern stuff, people. You will not see this in any fucking old school RPG, no matter what the system. But like I said, it's weird because on the other hand, the actual gameplay is very old school. Use the menu to hit, do magic, that kind of thing, and your options are fairly limited, especially at the start. You don't really start with any spells or special abilities. Like those you get with weapons you get later on in the game. And I think if there's a failing to this old school ideology, it's the AI. Because it's got some old school bullshit in this game. Maybe not so much with the normal enemies. Like, they function about as much as you'd expect them to. Like, they'll attack pretty mindlessly. I guess another subset of not having levels in this game is combat doesn't really scale one way or the other. Like, you're never going to hit a part where it's, the enemies will just beat the piss out of you, sight unseen. But on the other hand, you're not, like, you don't fight to get stronger, so you'll never utterly dominate the enemies either. So good point, bad point maybe there. That being said, the enemies do hit you pretty hard. That doesn't really change no matter what advancements in armor or weaponry you may get. The enemies will continuously hit hard, which means you're going to need healing items. And there are many healing items. And another weird sticking point to the old is you can only carry up to 20 of each healing item. And I'm not sure why that number was reached exactly, because it doesn't really feel like an integer problem. The whole, you can only get 255 of something because that's the max you can get in one, byte of data? Yeah. I think it's byte. So, and in terms of getting money, well, you'll be a bit restricted until you get to access a fishing spot, and that's where any and all grinding is going to come into place. Not so much from gaining levels, but you're going to need money for healing items, maybe strength potions, but I'll be honest, I really didn't use those outside of boss encounters. But yeah, it's like, if there's a place this game falls apart, it's the boss encounters. Okay, so a
good old RPG hit point sponges that do way too much damage.
Bullshit attacks that they can fucking spam. Yeah, this is a fucking a bit of the old school that you could have left in the fucking past, because the bosses more often than not will have this one fucking attack that if they unleash, not only will it damage you, it will prevent you from attacking in some fashion. You're stunned, you're frozen, what have you. But here's the thing. It doesn't wear off in a turn. You know, like instead of the first boss I encountered this with had this all-seeing eye attack that will allow them to block any action you make. But, you know, you might think, oh, this is the time to do a healing item or a strength potion. Oh, no, if you do that and, you know, they do a regular attack, you're still being blocked. You're being blocked until you make a move. This was bad design. Full stop.
Does it give a warning before they do their thing?
No, it just happens.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
I just sometimes in games the enemies give a warning, and then like if you shield, it's not as bad.
You can't block these.
Okay. No, but sometimes it doesn't block it, but it like reduces the effect. It's okay if it doesn't, or okay, it's not great if it doesn't. I was just curious because that's a mechanic that some games have.
Yeah, this game has it, but it's done badly. I'm thankful it's only applied to bosses, but then it becomes a game, if you will, of, oh God, please don't let the boss spam this one attack 3 fucking times, which happened. Like, yeah, absolutely infuriating. Should have been not a thing, but that's really the biggest issues in just like pure design aesthetics, let's say. You know, it's like probably the bigger issue, at least if you're playing the version I did. See, this came on a physical Game Boy cart first, but for whatever reason they decided to port it to Steam. So, you know, how do I rate this? You know, along the lines of a Game Boy game where like graphically it's fine. Looks pretty good for a Game Boy game. A lot of the overworld art looks very Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening. Like right
I
down
think a lot of it is related to the size of sprites that the Game Boy can do easily.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, just look at the font. That's some Link's Awakening font right there. But in terms of the battle graphics, they're much more detailed. You know, like really detailed artwork for a Game Boy game, which I guess is the advantage of having a one-on-one battle, battle system. I suppose the problem is like a lot of the actual art looks kind of bad, like just kind of off in like say the faces or things of that nature. Not all the time, but there were definitely some times where I'm like, this could have used a few more run-throughs. The sound, yeah, that's pretty accurate to the Game Boy as well. Not gonna lie, the soundtrack got on my nerves pretty quickly. Because it's got once again, it's got a quirk of the Game Boy where this is less music and more sound fragments on loop for about 15 seconds. Especially like the starting out theme. I moved to mute at points pretty quickly.
Which is an important skill point for the producer because even though it's super primitive, we have ample evidence that it's possible to make great music on the Game Boy.
Yes. Yes, we do. Like, so it's just bad music. Oh, so anyway, like just in overall terms of a package, it's pretty impressive for a Game Boy game. Reviewing it in the confines of Steam is a lot more difficult because, yeah, you made a pretty decent Game Boy game. I'm not playing it on the Game Boy. You know, I'm playing this old school RPG in the nexus of what may be the greatest RPG platform ever devised. It's like, you know, if I were choosing to pick something old school, it wouldn't be something like this. not only is it like it feels archaic, it feels dusty, it feels creaky.
You're using either a gamepad with lots of buttons or a keyboard and mouse to deal with a game that literally only has 8 possible inputs and 4 of those are directions.
Yeah, I'm like, it's kind of, I don't want to beat up on the game because it's not necessarily its fault, but I'm not reviewing this in a vacuum either. It's like looking this, and also keep in mind, like, look at right down to the color palette. It's got that puke green look of something that you'd be playing on an actual Game Boy screen. Actual Game Boy games taken outside that environment look black and white. Not
does the emulator or whatever let you change the color palette?
No.
Because presumably the way this works is that there's like some kind of built-in emulator.
I did not find any sort of emulator, any sort of button to change the color palette. And I have yet to meet a soul who liked the aesthetic, like the actual color scheme of the original Game Boy. Like,
yeah, the point of that screen was that it was cheap.
Yes. It was cheap and efficient for the late 80s, early 90s, and it didn't drain your batteries after.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Cheap and low power consumption.
Like that screen enabled the Game Boy to win the early portable wars. But it's also, it was fucking ugly. The system was ugly. And I don't think anyone disputes that. I mean, for fuck's sake, Sega attacked the Game Boy because of its, let's say, workmanlike aestheticals.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the overall problem I have is, you made a very impressive Game Boy package, and you ported it to a place where, I got Tales of Zestiria for like $7.50. That was a sale, sure, but you can get new school games. You can get old school games that offer more than this. Like, you can get the Bard's Tale trilogy for about the price of this. And those are, ancient. Those are actual ancient PC RPGs, but them being PC RPGs, they're going to have a lot more versatility than something that was programmed for the Game Boy. Like I said, it really feels like, the reason you'd pick this up is because it's a new Game Boy game, not because it's a decent homage to the Game Boy lifestyle that you can find on Steam. So another thing that compounds that is the price of the game, because this clocks in at $16. Once again,
I guess I kind of get it if they coded this the way you code a Game Boy game, because that's a bitch.
No doubt. $16 isn't an unseemly amount for a new game, but it gets hard to recommend it. The Steam version of that, when you could buy objectively better games. It really, like, the purchasing recommendation really comes down to how much do you like lime green primitive RPGs here. And if you're in that kind of market, then I'd probably recommend the actual Game Boy cartridge, if you can get it. I honestly don't know what kind of print run it had. I know it wasn't done by Limited Run Games. At least I don't think. I think the development house themselves did the physical release. But that was back in January, so could be out of print. I don't discount that. But if you can snag the Game Boy version, that's the one I'd recommend. It's probably going to be more expensive, but this was really meant for that platform. Granted, playing it on an actual Game Boy is not recommended either. Thankfully there are
I guess if you have a Game Boy Pocket or something.
Yeah.
Or Color. With the Game Boy Color, you do get to choose what color it is.
Yeah. Or I suppose the Game Boy Light. Yeah, I know that was only Japan only, but still, it's an option. I guess even the Super Game Boy or the Game Boy Advance. Although if you're busting out a Game Boy Advance, I guess play that after Golden Sun and all the really excellent RPGs on that system.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah. So my old recommendation, if in Game Boy form, subpar rating for the Steam version. Don't buy the Steam version. Like I said, this was a game I was mulling over pretty hard all week.
Unless you're really interested in the novelty of the idea and don't have access to anything to play the actual thing on, I guess.
Right. I mean, you just have to be super into this to buy this, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, just buy Dragon Wars or something like that. If you're gonna go old school with the RPGs, get a PC RPG, or pick up one of Square Enix's 16-bit offerings within reason. Don't get the Final Fantasy 5 or 6 games. Chrono Trigger's up to snuff now, that kind of thing. Those hold up. This, once again, this is kind of weak compared to the top of original Game Boy RPGs. It's no Pokemon Red or Blue or Final Fantasy Legend series, but it's not awful either. So that'll about do it for Dragonborne here. Be sure to tune in after the break, as Petty Fan will be reviewing Sir Lovelot.